Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my boxing hangouts, and this is one I would prefer not to do. A very sad day for the sport of boxing and for those of us who were good friends with Dan Goossen, who, of course, departs this world at age 64, much too soon, after a very short battle with cancer. Danny, a larger-than-life figure in every way, both professionally and personally, a gregarious, fun human being who I had the pleasure of knowing for over 35 years on a very close basis. Dan's legacy in the world of boxing is one that is intriguing because over the course of his career, he started out doing fights at the Reseda Country Club in California, building a champion, Michael Nunn, who went on to become middleweight champion of the world and was one of the best fighters, pound for pound, in the world. Brought the Gabe and Rafael Ruelas, those two young brothers who went into his gym and trained with Dan's brother Joe. He brought them to world titles and also resurrected the career of Frankie Duarte, great bantamweight and super bantamweight champion. And during that period, Dan created an atmosphere in California that was very, very special. We would go there to do our ESPN shows and go to the Reseda Country Club, and there would be celebrities on hand, people like Gene Hackman and Dale Robertson and Norm Wendt and Stallone and you name it. They were all there. And we would go into the David Hasselhoff came on a regular basis. So many celebrities, and I'd go into the audience and interview them for our ESPN show. And it was a wonderful atmosphere. And over the years, Dan continued to build champions. Would go on. He had several different organizations. He was with a group in Denver that he was the president of, and then had Goossen Tudor Promotions in these recent years, where he built Andre Ward into a world champion. Though they had their issues recently, Andre Ward still issued a very nice text today of condolences for Dan Goossen, and he was around the greats and near greats. There he was with Don King. This came very recently when another fighter that Dan Goossen promoted, Chris Arreola, fought Bermain Stavern in what turned out to be a very, very good heavyweight fight. And Chris was one of the fighters that Danny brought along to stardom as well. Dan was always just on the fringe of the two or three major promoters, whether it was Golden Boy and Top Rank or whether it was Main Events or Don King. But always, during his long career, Danny remained an important player in the sport of boxing because he always had one or two or three champions or good fighters that he was involved in that kept him on the highest level. And a part of what he did was buttressed by his brother Joe Goossen, who is one of the best trainers, in my opinion, in the sport of boxing, and so often shared center stage with Dan. And as with Danny, I share a very close personal relationship with Joe. I have for many, many years. And I can tell you that to all of the Goossen family, and it is a large and robust and meaningful family with 8 brothers and 2 sisters, this loss will be incalculable. A little while ago, the Goossen family lost Greg Goossen, who was a fine athlete in his own right, played for the New York Mets, acted in movies, and like Dan, was a very gregarious, larger-than-life person. But then you can make that statement about all the Goossen boys, including Joe. On a personal level, for me, this loss is, in some ways, devastating. And I say it because I'm not trying to personalize this. I'm kind of a lightning rod, I think, in doing this video right now for so many people. I could give you the names of 20 people like me who were good friends with Dan, who shared special moments with him, and are feeling today devastated. Dan got you involved. He's one of those people that got you involved in all kinds of activities because they were going to be fun. Over the years, I've played basketball with him. And by the way, Dan Goossen, for those of you that may not know, was a superb basketball player who played in college and had a tryout with, I believe it was the St. Louis Spirits in the ABA, and came very close to making that team. He was a terrific basketball player, and I'll never forget Dan Parks. I'll never forget. We went to he and me and Akbar Muhammad, who's the site coordinator for Top Rank, and another gentleman. We went to play in this 3-man basketball league in Laguna Beach, and it was a high-powered group. This was a long time ago. Danny was still a very good player, and I could actually hoop a little bit back then. And we had one other really good player was. And we went there and played, and it was maybe the most fun 5 days, to be perfectly candid, 5 of the most fun days I've ever had in my entire life. And you can't make that statement about too many events, can you?
Hooping with Goossen and Laguna Beach.
Exactly. And those are the kind of things that he brought out in people. They would have softball games. Back in the day when Michael Nunn was a famous fighter, they would get all of their group, and then they'd get everybody from ESPN or whoever was doing the fights, and there'd be softball games between the two. Now, that just doesn't happen anymore in the world of boxing. It was a collegial kind of atmosphere, and it was encouraged by Danny Goossen. So Danny was a fascinating figure. He was to those people that did business with him, like every boxing promoter. He was he was a fierce tiger for his fighters and for his business endeavors, as anyone is in the sport of business. But I think all along the way, and I think as we've seen with the different condolences that have poured out for Danny Goossen, we see that those business differences that people may have had, and those battles that are intrinsic in promoting boxing do not diminish today what people are feeling about this death of Danny Goossen. I think this has really impacted the sport dramatically and has impacted so many people. Now, one of the last interviews I did with Dan was back in Atlantic City. Was just, I think it was for the Ward-Frotch fight, so it was a while ago. Even though I talk to Dan all the time, I have talked to him all the time on the phone, but we were able to get together and do a nice interview. And every time I did an interview with Dan, whether it was on for Showtime, the Boxing Channel, any entity that I was, or ESPN that I was involved in, it was never just a straight interview. We had fun. He was always you never knew where the topic area was going to go to. It could go anywhere. So you had to be ready for just about anything. I think the only thing, Dan, we didn't hit was nuclear disarmament and foreign policy. But beyond that, we got just about everywhere. And so on this day, I wanted to share some thoughts with you about Dan Goossen and talk about him because. We all know when somebody passes, it's kind of cathartic to be able to say this. I feel the same way I did when Emanuel Stewart died a little over a year and a half ago, however long it was, where I just didn't really know. I didn't want to, like in this, I didn't prepare something. I didn't sit and make notes for this or think about how exactly should I deliver this, because it's not that kind of thing. I couldn't do that. I actually haven't been able to get my brain wrapped around this yet today. But you feel like you have to make some way of communicating. Now, I wanted to communicate to you, the boxing fans, as well as to everybody that knew Dan Goossen in the sport of boxing. So I'll close this out by saying we will miss you, Dan. My condolences to the Goossen family and to everybody who knew Dan. He was somebody that made an impact on your life, and it was a good impact.